Hi, my friend. There you go. Good morning. It's Monday. This is our second week as we go into this podcasting environment. And we've covered some interesting topics, and I've had quite a bit of offline responses, one or two online responses, which have been at least pleasant, courteous, and in some cases, certainly supportive. Some of you may know that one of my mantras is that I don't necessarily want to like you. Moreover, and before you react, you have a hissy fit, I want to understand you. And that perspective drives this morning's discussion, especially since we're experiencing and hearing about a small yet impactful negative response to the various vaccines that have been presented. Most people are doing well with it. They have slight side effect, which is typical of taking in a vaccine. At the same time, my focus for this discussion is, and the topic is entitled, "Don't Communicate Like a Consumer." And then I'm going to change gears completely, and I'm going to put on this little uh, welding goggles. And I'll tell you why in a moment. I was going to present with these. These are welding goggles. Now, what would I, as a business consultant coach, online provider of courses in the area of communications, want with goggles? Well, as you can see, they're pretty cool, right? They're not the cheapest. I thought they were kind of interesting, especially since my wife bought them for me and said, "I heard you're doing a program about not being a consumer." And the premise behind these is that we seem to come to the marketplace with goggles. We come with blinders. We come with a filter that has been superimposed on us. So there are the goggles. That's the theme, right? Pretty cool goggles, right? All right. And they fit right over my glasses. So they're pretty big. They are pretty big. They are comfortable. I haven't worn them for an extended period of time. I'm not sure if I'm going to go out and find some welding to do. They're definitely going to end up on my Chutsky wall, right? They're going to end up on my Chutsky wall because I don't want these to get lost in my garage and in my small shed, right? A raccoon may run off with them. Oh, I need some tea. So, our discussion today, don't communicate like a consumer. We know that the financial world is fraught with creative minds. And it seems that these creative minds are dipping into the jar, knowing full well that governments have a repository of blind consumer, um, shall I say, trapped people, us. So, what does that got to do with communication? WeWorks, this gentleman, Adam Newman, right? Total charade. Again, even though the research people who are experts in the field of leasing, property management, scaling, people who are experts in financing that type of asset, felt that his model was not sustainable. We had Wells Fargo twice, and I can speak of Wells Fargo because we have an account with Wells Fargo, so I have a stake in the game. I have a dog in the game. If you're a vegan, you have vegetables in the game. Fake account scandal, which actually did impact us personally. And then they have the issue of double billing consumers who had died. And yet we still march to that marketing advertising promo that says you need to have a bank account, a savings account. And what's ironic today about savings account, of course, and those who were around when savings accounts were getting 6%. And it's interesting when I say that to people, they don't, it doesn't resonate with them. It's like, oh, okay. And they're happy with 1.2, 2%, if that. And they don't know the rule of 72 that says if you invest X amount of money at a certain rate, how long that will take. You divide the interest rate into that number. And that will take you how many years. That will tell you how many years it will take for you to double your money. So the communication, this is what I'm driving at, right? We've got blinders on. Pretty cool, huh? Look at these. Yeah, it's like a aqua blue. Pretty cool. We've got the blinders on. We've been told a message. We've been fed a message, and then our behavior does not guard us, nor help our children, nor help our situation, our station, to improve. We kind of go down the proverbial rat hole. U.S. Bank Corp, led by a gentleman called Andy Ciceri. These are what we term in research papers and in educational institutions of higher learning as the captains of their industry. Yet, when we talk about servant leadership, when we talk about intellectual capabilities, when we talk about ethics, scruples, when we talk about mandatory requirements to follow in good business, best practices, this financial world, the financial world, seems to be totally void. Bank of America, again, another bank we have accounts with their manipulation of gold and silver. And for those who invest in gold, you know that that's a standard under which currencies are traded. So when we think of these new currency models coming out and all the noise around their stability, their ability to trade, we hear the pushback. We must also take into consideration why these existing institutions would not want that. And so you have to then make a decision, but you have to be informed. You have to know what's going on in the marketplace. You have to at least hear about and begin to network with other people in the marketplace. Of course, one of the biggest schemes was Madoff, who was no small player, was the chief executive officer of the United States stock market. Do you realize how influential an individual is when they reach that pinnacle of any profession, any career, any service? And yet he was so bored. He said, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. Let's see how people go. So he decided to gamble on his reputation and his relationship with people. So when we talk about communications, managing life's changes through effective communications, are we bringing to the table tools and resources and a mindset that says we must go through certain protocols, we must go through certain steps to ensure that the individual that I believe in, I trust, is doing the right thing? I think it's a respectful position to be in, to say to somebody, I trust you with my $4 million, my $10 million, my business, my career, as with those that going looking for employment, and they put their trust in someone else to find them and or guide them, right? A career counselor. I don't know. I want to know what that career counselor has done. I want to know. People say to me, well, what have you done? You don't have a PhD. You don't have a master's. I have a history of working with organizations, nonprofit, government, for profits, and people have provided testimonials as to what I have done. 3 colleges, three state community colleges over 15 years. So it is my passion for communications, using communications as my pivotal point, my central theme, and then working with people to help them solve their problems. Volunteering with the project management institution, even though I'm not certified. Teaching project management for 4 years, not once or twice or 6 months or a year, for 4 years, actually probably 5 years. Working in venues that people have gave me feedback that they felt I helped them. So if we look at our financial world and we come to the table with questions that evoke engagement, not just questions to trap. That's not my intention. My intention is let's have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, if that other person is not willing to have a meaningful conversation, then they're not the right person for you to engage in. It can be fixing your car. It can be getting a haircut, especially getting your hair done. Women, oh, come on, you got to be kidding me. When I go with my wife, I've been doing it for decades. Go with my wife, I sit down, I work. I've used that time as a time and place to get out of the office, get away from the traditional trappings of a working environment, and watch and listen and observe. And what I have learned, and this is why I present myself in this fashion, what I have learned is that people are constantly looking for better means, better resources, better ways of communicating. Not just the academic, not just setting up a resume, not just setting up your traditional business plan. We could take a business plan and have a whole conversation just on that, because I think just as a resume, a business plan must be dynamic. In other words, with today's technology, you should be able to filter in links, videos, audio files, text that's different sizes to engage the reader, to captivate the reader, and show your business in a light that says this is someone who's passionate, who is considerate, who has done research and shows what seems to be tangent information, yet relevant to the success and the outreach to that community that they serve. So we have these global impacts on our lives. WeWorks, Wells Fargo, US Bank Corp, Bank of America, Madoff, Bill Wang. Bill Wang. Now you might say, well, I can't do anything about it. It's above my pay grade. No, this translates into how we behave and respond in the marketplace. Moreover, it speaks to how we engage with our family, friends, and associates, and most importantly, the message we send on to our children. There's a message right now that perhaps I will share in another conversation about the seemingly blatant killing of African American males. They're always wrong. Really? Moreover, what is that community doing? We can do one of two ways. We can go down the old, non-sustainable, achievable path, which the system welcomes, or we can begin, as this is what this conversation is all about, stop communicating like consumers. Now that means giving up your labels. That means giving up your entitled vehicles. right? Your titled vehicles. That means giving up the illusion, the social illusion that you have arrived. There was a program back in the 70s when I first came over here. What was it called? I can't remember. It was a black family who had left the so-called uh, neighborhood of their peers and moved into a more wealthy environment. And I found that at the very best, a poor portrayal because I didn't come through that. And many African Americans did not come through that, never experienced that. Yet the social conversation, right? The social conversation was, yeah, everyone comes through that. Well, I recall many Europeans coming through an environment, and many of you may have read or seen the movie Angela's Ashes, because of that messaging, because of that socialization, because of that propaganda that said these groups of people are going to be placed into this class and represented in this fashion. So, as an individual, I present myself the way I wish to, and I then identify with people that are, as I say, elevating their own conversations. And I'm looking for better ways to do things, looking for compatible ways. And I'm not afraid to engage with one another. I'm not afraid to identify what the other person says they're about. And as long as they act, and this is really the linchpin of it all, you must continue to act in that fashion. We can talk all day long, and we know the dynamics of family, for example, where the parents will tell the children, do A, B, C, and D, and they're doing something totally different. Then the children will take something different and duplicate. And that's what we have to do as people, as human beings, as communicators with one another. It's interesting also, much of the noise in the news about communications, about events that happen in our communities, do not focus on much of the positive engagement with one another, right? So there are groups that support just basic fundamental interaction with other people, and they enjoy that. They find it actually very healthy. So once again, coming back to don't communicate like a consumer has much broader implications. You know, sometimes when we're driving in the woods and there are homes, we're not in the, Spokane, some remote place. I'd always refer to it as um, Death Valley, Oregon, somewhere. We're remote, but we're not that remote. And we find that people are welcoming. We find that people are inquisitive. We find that people actually had prior relationships and healthy conversations that would endear them to and with one another. So that's the noise we need to keep reverberating. That's the wavelength, if you will, of communications that we need and that is healthy. Let's just see what's going on here. We got a little message. Why can't we be friends? Okay, why can't we be friends? There you go. Why can't we be friends? Let's take on that question a moment. Why can't we be friends? Why can't we take away the fear mongering and simply say, hey, what are you all about? It's interesting also how when we talk about the amount of financial assets that these individuals reap and realize the minuscule assets and resources and financial wealth that the average person around the world lives on, not only is the disparity humongous, moreover, we realize that everybody can have a piece of the pie. Now, I know there are many who say, well, if you build your wealth, you should own it. Absolutely, I agree with that. At the same time, can we not elevate our conversation, elevate our mental fortitude, and realize that there's only so much I'm going to really need and have? Why are we so selfish? Why are we so incapable of sharing? is the mechanism of life, this artificial mechanism that we live under, this construct, um, so abstract of recognizing and communicating to others that we can live with less, help others, and in fact, enrich ourselves much more, much greater than what we currently have. So our value system, right? We talk about a value system. This is very telling when year after year, massive organizations, not just with the leaders, not just with these captains of industry, that are raping whole economies, whole generations in some cases. Look at the tobacco with college tuition, that we don't begin to stop acting, and that's the crucial point. Stop acting to support those systems. It just doesn't make sense, does it? Now, I know there's a lot of psychology in there, and there's billions of dollars of advertising dollars to ensure that we feel inadequate in our space without these trappings. And there is the rub. You may recall on some of my earlier posts last week, and even earlier on my live chats on my YouTube channel, I speak about having a value system of your own, self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy. And that means you are not just happy or satisfied, satiated with where you are. Moreover, the meaning of things shifts. The meaning of things shifts. And that conversation is certainly very, very personal. It is very personal. There's no doubt about it. Yes, I'm having my tea again because today has been an interesting morning. My morning typically starts around about 4:30. And as I prepare for the week, and then I look at what I'm doing for the day, and certainly most importantly, the podcasting that I've been doing now, just a week, short period of time. My goal is to do it for 6 days. I am starting to remove not just activities and tasks, but conversation. I don't have to engage so much in noisy communications with myself. I want to then take this topic, right? Don't communicate like a consumer, and overlay it with solution focused brief questions. So here's a few that I pulled out specifically that address this. So instead of getting frustrated with this communications, and Bloomberg, certainly is one of my sources of reading and listening to during the course of the day. Here's a question. What would you like to experience instead of the problem? What would you like to experience instead of the problem? So it's not that I need to find a better investment vehicle or platform, which there are out there. More importantly, I think this question says to us, what is more important to you, right? What is really more important to you? And we can develop that conversation by saying, well, a lot of times when people have achieved their highest point in their profession, they go off and they do study. They go off and do mental reflection. They go off and study other theologies to find meaning. Well, why can't we do that right here every day? Why do we have to leave our environment that we're accustomed to? Why can't we carve out, shall we say, a micro economy? When I first came to America, I saw it as a very busy, very in your face environment. And to a great extent, it still is. At the same time, I said, okay, if my parents want me to be here, I can carve out a micro economy. We have the macro economy that we're all in. We really can't get off the playing field, so to speak. At the same time, I can carve out a small niche. And I found out that many nationalities, especially migrant workers, immigrant workers like myself being immigrant to this country, I they have afforded that. They have created that, and they stay within their own groups because it's safe, because they don't have to have that negative influence. Now, there's pros and cons to both, right? We have Amish down the road, and we see that many of their youth are breaking out because of the influx, as they refer to, of the English culture. We are all referred to as English because that's the pervasive culture that they see. And their young, their youth, are breaking out and coming into that English culture. So they're changing their conversation, their manner of socialization. That communication has definitely been impacted the way that the younger members of their community wish to live. Some of you may also know in China, there's a whole new middle class. In Japan, in India, there's a whole new middle class. Corporations are going into remote areas, very remote areas, because remember, their landmass and their populations are much greater than ours. And they are forging new communications. They're forging new identities. They're taking the young women and they're telling the darker skinned young women that you need to literally bleach your skin. My goodness, they did that in America in the 20s, 30s, and 40s and earlier. They've done that across the world. It's all about communication. It's all about what you want to communicate to yourself, your family, your loved ones, to people within your social enclave. And I started with finance because, let's face it, without a certain level of income, you don't exist, you don't survive. We saw this also in India with microloans, where they literally got $1, $5, $10 to start a business. That's how financially um, deprived, I'll use that word, deprived, their systems are. Certainly it's to do with currency change, certainly it's to do with acquisition of assets, certainly it's to do with trading in that community, in those cultures, in those countries. At the same time, what was experienced, what was communicated, was that when they couldn't pay those $5 and $10 back, they were committing suicide. Same thing with Japan. There is a forest, and I should have had the name here. There is a forest in Japan where people go to commit suicide because of the social embarrassment. If there isn't a more poignant definition of effective communications, fundamental communications, managing life's changes through effective communications, that is it. That is it. You're telling me that your social construct, your culture, is so tightly wrapped and you are endeared to that, that if you cross that proverbial line, you're going to take your life. That's an incredibly powerful force. And that is why I started today with the program entitled Don't Communicate Like a Consumer. When I was up in Ithaca doing a project, and some of the mortgage bankers took me out to a couple of the venues, and there was the rapids, the falls, and I noticed the nets, and I said, "Oh, they're preventing stones or birds or things of that nature from going into the ravine." They said, "No, it's because of the kids. The kids come from other cultures, and when they don't cut it, many throw themselves into the ravine." I was just like, "Are you kidding me? You can't take that knowledge and apply it into another profession. You can't take that experience and use it in another manner or form." No, because of the social pressure, what is communicated to us as we go through life, the embarrassment. We are attached to non-entity, non-important. I gotta say, they're not important. These things cannot be that important that we take our lives. Yet that is what has happened in India with microloans. Google it. It's as poignant as it can be, and it's still going on. It's not removed. In America and in the West, we have what's called payday loans. You can't get any more embarrassed that the money you're bringing in is not enough to carry your lifestyle, and then you're giving 10, 20, 30% away before you even get paid through payday loans. That's what is being communicated, right? What's the other one? Rent a center. You pay 3 and 4 times the price of a product because you're renting it. So it's a very serious issue. And that's why I started off the program with my welding goggles. See, there's the metaphor. It gets kind of hot when you can't pay that. It gets hot when you buy into a construct of social etiquette and social protocol and social station. Americans think that they don't have a class structure. Yes, you do. You come out of one. You have been forged by one. Our whole system is a class structure. And if we continue to communicate in this fashion and not begin to break down, yes, you have to break down. Sometimes it is the size of your extremities that counts. It's a very serious construct. And as much as I like to keep things fairly light, most of the topics I deal with in the marketplace with companies, with their employees, with their communities that they serve, the engagement, it's more than just technicals and fundamentals of negotiation. It's more than technicals and fundamentals of arbitration. It is having the mindset, the intent of people coming together. What is their intent? Are you there to just simply crush them and make them feel inadequate and then overlay a coating of sugar so their wounds can be dressed, yet still festering? You've heard the expression, you are the salt of the earth. I have a question about that. I know salt preserves for a period of time. I've just never seen anything grow out of a salty environment. Salty as in the chemical construct, or salty attitude and personalities. I just never have seen any positive uh, growth from that. Once again, what we choose in our conversation, words, meanings, are everything. And I feel we should not, based on this evidence, based on experience, based on exposure, based on everyday people going about their business, we need to start to address that. We need to ask for clarification. We need to ask for evidence. If I'm going to give you my money and I find out that your bank has 2, 3, 4 times been involved in deceptive practices, why should I believe in you? And that goes for the new bank on the block as well. What's your business model? What's your philosophy? We talk about a vision and a mission. You know, is it still sustainable? Again, I work for a behavioral health organization, and maybe the individual, it was a woman who started the organization. Maybe they had good intentions. Over the decades, is that still in play, or has the economy permitted the leadership to wane from that? These are the issues that we pass on our DNA to our children. We pass on our DNA to our relatives. We pass them on to our husbands and wives in that relationship, within that timeline that we're here. That's why I say, how do we elevate the conversation? How do we live past our own existence? In other words, the messaging. What are we communicating? Other people I get a little perturbed. What do you mean? You have to look past your existence in order for your essence to be true, right? Your essence has to be true. And that's the challenge, because we've seen so many people cross the line, go from one perspective to one position to another, take different positions. We've certainly seen that in the halls of our political establishments. How do you show the people in your life that you care about them? How do you show the people in your life that you care about them? Time and time again, hard issues, time and time again. We've heard of what we consider financially wealthy people committing suicide. And aren't they the ones in the best position, supposedly, to get help? Aren't they the ones to have earnest relationships? Apparently not. We've seen that over and over again. And as much as people will say, well, there was nothing we could do, we didn't see it, we didn't recognize the signs, we're not experienced, we're not trained. I disagree. I think as human beings, as sensory creatures, which we are, we've lost that skill. We've decided to let it go for material trappings. I'm not against material trappings. I'll be the first one to tell you I want cobalt blue Bentley, French deerskin interior, cabaret roof, and my wife and I traveling from New Jersey to San Francisco and then up Route 666 up to Vancouver. Boom. And then over to Newfoundland. Done. So I'm very materialistic. There's no doubt about that. The issue is how we convey that. The issue is, what are we willing to do? Are we willing to ignore and sidestep the other needs of people? Are we willing to lose our fiduciary responsibility with and to one another? Are we willing to lose that social responsibility of connectivity with our children? Are we willing to give that up because we are so scared of the system? That's communications. That's the essence of what we're doing, what we see every day. And we can sit in a room and talk about customer service and then get up and have no communication or protocol in working with our spouses, working with our children, working with our nephews and nieces, those who we are guardians of. That's the reality. When did you first notice that things were improving? Right? We can reverse that and say, when did you notice that things were getting out of control? And then the most important part is, when are you beginning to address those issues? Are you beginning to express in a manner that the other person can recognize that you are aware, that you are concerned, and that there is a need to work together, mutually beneficial outcomes, um, to get a desirable outcome, to get a better outcome, to correct the scope, the wandering of that individual. I had a cousin, excuse me, who came over. I think it was from my father's side. This is going back, goodness, 30 years, possibly more. And at the time, my sister was at home with my mother. This is stateside. And she was bringing men into the house. And I had happened to come over that summer, and I noticed all this commotion, and I came downstairs and I said, "What's going on?" And these two guys were in the kitchen. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't try to engage in any form or identity. And I told her, "These two have to leave." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because it's my mother's house and I'm not going to have that behavior here." Now, you might immediately say, "Well, Ron, surely you had, you know, those types of exchanges." Actually, no, not in my mother's house. Actually, no, not in my mother's house. Certainly not without her knowledge. And there's the difference, not without her knowledge. So there has to be a consistency there. There has to be a consistency. You might be young, dumb, and you know the end of that expression. Um, but at the same time, I believe you have to have respect for the other person. We're not talking about being perfect. We're not talking about everything being right. What we are talking about is a consistent behavior that says, I'm going to manage myself, I'm going to manage my environment, and I'm going to share that with people that are of concern. And we're going to be human about it. We're going to be decent about it. We're going to be respectful about it. How do we do that in an environment when our leadership does not show or exhibit that same behavior, we must take our ball and proverbial ball and go off to the next court. We've seen that time and time again. Women have come to the fray and said, it's not going to, it just doesn't work. In fact, in WeWork, that was one of the biggest challenges. So there are environments that prey on our need. That's really what's happening. Right? Our need to be accepted, our need to be inclusive, our need to be part of that community. And I submit to you that it's not worth it, because you are left with that conversation in your mind, that doubt, and it just marinates and marinates and marinates. And you could always do better. You can always do better. You need to communicate that need to yourself. You need to reinforce it with behavior, with words, with actions. That's why I submit to you every morning you should be meditating. What does meditation? Then you ask the question, what does meditation mean? What does meditation mean to you? Is it listening to the birds in the morning, watching the light come up and then the sun? Is it recognizing those subtle differences, right? And you don't have to be concerned with all the noise that's around us. Yeah. Don't communicate like a consumer. I know there are many challenges, especially with children, that they want what the neighbors want. There are simple ways of addressing that. Sit them down and show them the finances. That's about as basic as you can get. Now, if you're embarrassed about that, then maybe there's the rub. Maybe there's the rub. At the same time, there are many cultures that are still breaking through that financial barrier. And what they do is they express their need for their children to excel and do better in life than they. Once again, that's a bond, that's a communication, that's a way of saying, this is where we are. This is where I would like you to be. In order to get there, we need to do these steps. And in doing these steps, we don't know exactly what order, but we need to do these steps. We need to get you into a college. Well, how do we do that? How do we find funding for that? And as you're on that path of communicating that, that's where reality starts to manifest itself. The possibility. There's a big difference. That's a massive difference than not communicating and or communicating poorly and or sabotage family members. Oh, that happens all the time. Oh, absolutely. Oh, you think you're better than us. You want to go off and do something more. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, I do. Because that's what life is about. Life is about exploring, discovering, navigating new paths, exploring new possibilities, challenging yourself, falling on your face and getting yourself back up, finding your path in life. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It really doesn't. Because the interesting thing is, and you don't always need research to support your position. You can do what is known as a position paper. This is what I believe. The current situation with this COVID and some of the pushback with the vaccine, some people are not taking it, some people are, is that this has happened in the past. So if you don't know just that, then your body of knowledge is incomplete, right? What you're drawing on to make a decision is incomplete. Your assumptions are not as well represented as they could be. So that's number one. Number two, people that are much older than you have gone through similar, if not the same thing. So now you've lost that perspective. You can't call on that, even if they have passed and you had the opportunity to speak with them, as I have with my father-in-law, who I didn't speak a lot with him, but the engagement I had has helped me go forward. Certainly with my mother, certainly with my father, and some other family members. They have helped me address challenges as I go forward. They have allowed me to arrest the reactionary part of our being, of our need to respond to a situation, or in some cases react to that situation, and take a moment out Just take a moment out. Um, I believe that your philosophy must hit the road and be tactical, right? So if you think of um, finance, I won't steal. Okay, so I find money in the office and I decide not to take it, even though there are no cameras or no evidence that I was there. I decide to take it to HR or the appropriate authorities. So it's your philosophy that guides your actions. And you have to be comfortable with that, whatever that means, right? If you see someone being bullied, if you see someone being treated poorly, you go to certain authorities or certain people within that authority, that can also be a subset, and you let them know what's going on. Or what I like to do is tell two remote, different groups that something is occurring, because then I get a real feel for the culture of the business. I've done that in the past. In one or two cases, it's been very, very favorable. In others, it has not. But it tells me something about the culture. It's communication. It's self-evident that there is a support mechanism or there isn't. Either way, you get to then choose. That's my point, right? You get to choose. You're not stuck in a rut. You're not marinating over and over and over again what to do. Don't think like a consumer. Don't communicate like a consumer, because that construct is abstract. It is not real. And if you take it on, unfortunately, you become the victim. You believe in an environment that technically doesn't exist, but in your mind, and it does once you behave in that fashion, once you respond to that means. So here we are, Monday, our seventh day. Go for 100, absolutely. Going for 300 plus. Just want to share with you. I have a young lady who will, I trust, be my first guest on this podcast. Um, you can certainly check out my other past podcasts because some of the conversations are still very relevant. Um, I had a gentleman called Hans Bosserup. He is engaged in the world, was engaged in the world of arbitration negotiations, and he hails from Germany. Um, and what was very interesting, just to show you how communication crosses lines, time frames, and cultures, I had posted his interview out on LinkedIn and Facebook, and people from the New Jersey chapter of arbitration reached out to me and said, "How come you didn't tell us he was going to be on?" He came and spoke with us some years ago, and we found it very interesting. That's what's so beautiful about having all this technology and the recordings of conversations. You can go back and you can look at what people have said. You can go back and reflect on what you have said, what your perspective was, what was your position. Has it changed? Have you found that there's new meaning to things that you've been engaged in because of your experience? Does your experience fully engage you and therefore dictate how you think about something? Just want to take a quick look at something here. Check out the site and go to support, drop down to managing life changes. When I say check out the site, Ronald M. Allen, Allen, of course. Go to support, drop down to managing life changes podcasts. And what you'll see there is some of the history of the work that I've done, some of the people that I've managed to engage with. And the significance of that is to give it reference, to give this program reference. My goal here is to have a mix of guest interviews, conversations, and most importantly, comments that people can make about the topic, about their perspective on the topics that we discuss. I think it's very healthy. I think it is endearing. It's not a pissing match. It's not a right or wrong. It's perspective. Because I think Many of us have begun to realize that we have latent desires, we have triggers in us that we're not fully aware of. And when we're placed in a position, a situation, then our behavior reflects that position, not our total personality, just that position on that topic. So the expression, I didn't know, that's not their behavior. I would not have expected that from them. That's specious because you haven't seen them in that role, being impacted by these forces, having to address that particular situation. And that's a lifetime. That will take you a whole lifetime. Even my wife and I, we've had situations, little situations, bigger situations. I was like, oh no, that's not me, or I didn't realize I'd behave that way, or that's not the way I wanted to behave. It is because that's where you are, right? I have behaved in certain ways that I'm not terribly excited about. That was how I behaved, given the situation and the ingredients that led up to that point. The nice thing is, once you are cognizant of your behavior, the emotions were swelling up in you, and you have some resources, solution focused questions, strategic interventions, adult coaching interventions. You can apply them and begin to de-escalate yourself and or direct yourself in a path that you wish to go. That is effective communications. That's the benefit. That's the true value. So when you're in a public environment, when you're in a work environment, you get to you get to decide. Your brain, you turn on your brain and say, this is what I'm seeing and interpreting and feeling. I'm just going to watch and observe. I don't have to add to anything. I don't have to stir up the pot. That's what this is all about. That's what the value and the benefit is. Yes, we are going to feel depressed at times. Yes, we're going to feel the need for help and support, and we should reach out for those things. I ask you then, are you always going to react to every little situation? Or are you going to just realize it's okay? This too shall pass. The mantra, nothing is as good nor as bad as first reported. We've been through this before, we will get through it. A survivalist mantra, if you will. If you don't have hope, if you don't look forward, if you don't assess with fresh information and fresh insights, you are doomed to repeat your limiting behavior and limiting mental fortitude. Oh, you have fortitude. It may just be at a 2%. It's like one of these batteries in these cell phones, right? It wears down. You have to replenish it. You have to diagnose what's going on. Reach out for new data, new information, upload new information, which you can. We do that all the time. We just have to do it on purpose, and we have to decide what is truly sustainable. Oh, we can be hostile to one another. We've shown that time and time again, and we will continue. Is it really sustainable? Is it really beneficial? Is that the communication we're going to send out in the world to one another, to our next generation? Those are some of the meaningful questions that we have to address. Those are some of the challenges that some of us are afraid of. I really think some of us are really afraid of that because we don't know what's on the other side. Ironically, we don't know what's for breakfast. We don't know whether we're going to have lunch. We don't know whether the dinner, supper will be served yet. We go into the day. We go into the night. We wake up the next morning. That is faith. That is hope. That is communicating with yourself. That's the broadest form. The stuff of going to work and behaving in such a way to get things done, that's a route. That's just everyday mechanics. But when you can begin to assess situations and decide, I choose not to, and if I do choose to engage, I choose to engage in a meaningful, supportive manner. That's maturity. That's intellectual capital. Those are the resources that help our perspective, looking back retro, looking back on our lives and saying, okay, yeah, that was good. That was an experience. That was a pleasurable experience, as tough as it was, as uncertain as I was about my capabilities. I forged a path. I created new relationships. And as many of some of those videos on YouTube talk about, wherever you are, start. Wherever you are, start. And pull the resources that you feel you need, and throw out those that don't amount to anything, that are not helpful. One more question here. How would those close to you notice you are pleased to be progressing? We know for a fact that we need community. We know for a fact even the most introverted of introverts place a certain level of importance with other external life sources. So, for example, religion, that's an external life source, right? You can't touch it, you can't take it with you. It's in your mind, it's an external life source. Many of us, like myself and my wife, we give value to nature's best, what most people refer to as animals, because they are absolute. There's no left or right with them. Feed me, give me some water, allow me to go out in the bathroom, don't physically abuse me, and we're cool, right? And then there's all the other stuff, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, husbands and wives, nephews, colleagues at work, associates at the organization, fraternity and sorority, brothers and sisters, etc., and faith-based individuals, not the faith itself. How would those close to you notice you were pleased with your progression? That can be a great milestone of you achieving and sustaining the life that you want, that you need, that you've communicated to yourself. Check out Ronald M. Allen as our website. We've got some new audio files. Our posts are going out. By the way, I'm pleased to acknowledge that I did complete the requirements of the Small Business Administration SCORE, which is the Organization for Retired Executives. Their mentor certification program. I got my notice, I think, Thursday or Friday of last week. So if you are starting a business, if you are considering, if you're having troubles in your business, we have an international representation of business entrepreneurs, executives, people who have spent years, decades in specific areas of business that can help you. I'm more than happy to share. That's a free service. Check that out at sba.org. Or, of course, come to Ronald M. Allen. Down on the right-hand side, you'll see the logo. You cannot put that logo until you pass that certification process, and I will certainly help you in any way I can. In the meantime, enjoy and do not behave as a consumer, because as we've discussed today, there is just too much to lose and so much more to gain. Let's see how we're going to walk out here. We've got a little jingle that was placed together. I'll share with you some of the people that have helped me put this together in tomorrow's program. And I believe Thursday, Friday, if not next Saturday of this week, we will have our first guest. And I can guarantee you, this young lady is right on time. Take care.